Now I'm very pleased to welcome back a man that's been podcasting for a very long time. You know him as the co-host of the Deep Dive podcast and Brown Bag Bets. Really happy to bring back Mr. Andy Molitor from betspurts.com. You can follow Andy on Twitter at AndyMSFW. Andy, how is the year of our Lord 2022 treating you so far?
It's pretty fun. It's been a fun year. Like I hadn't no one's asked me that. Like the last few times I've done stuff, like, oh, how was the Masters? How was March Madness? No one's ever posed that. Like, how's been the whole year? It was a good playoffs. Like the NFL playoffs were good. The March Madness, the end of the college basketball season was fun. It has been a good year, sports betting and otherwise. And we've got, I mean, the NFL's a long ways away, but man, the draft is right now. Like, what are we're sitting here, 2 p.m. Central on a Tuesday, and I suppose it's like 48 plus 5, like 50 some hours away from watching the first night of the draft. I like how they split it up too. It used to be, way different if you're old like us and you remember when the draft was not a big event for TV. Like they've made the first round an event, and I love that. It's one of my favorite nights of the year.
I know it is. Even if you have a team that you root for that doesn't have a first pick, it's just so exciting.
Yeah, Rams fans.
These guys are going to land. Yeah, well, Bears fans.
Bears fans. So, yeah, there you
right
go.
Here, us poor souls. Do we ever have a first round? Not too often, but it's you're a fan of college football. You want to see where some of these players go. You want to see how the division turns out. There's just all these kind of reasons for it. And now, well, actually, over the past 3-4 years, sports betting it's been a lot funner, and there's just more and more props coming up every single year about it. And if you get ahead of the game a little bit, you can get some value, possibly you can get a little bit of both sides.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun. It's funny, Andy, me and you have to kind of go through all the information with a fine-tooth comb because there's a lot of fakes that teams put out and a lot of misinformation out there, isn't there?
Yeah, and you see stuff, and then you'll see stuff moving in these markets, and you won't know why. Like, I didn't see any news. What's going on? What do people know? Why is this getting bet today? Or, is it just some big bets at a few places that don't really have information behind them, or does somebody actually know something? Because you see that all the time, especially in markets that maybe you're not as familiar with. Where I'm not really heavy into the NBA news. And you'll see a big move in the NBA, and then I'll hear the injury news like 2 hours later. Like, oh, I don't have good connections with the NBA, or I'm not even asking the question. So it's just like, the people who are in the know, they're a few hours ahead of you, and then often you can just see that stuff happening on the board, on the screen, like in real time, well before you get that news.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you got to feel fortunate if you get something, but you have to trust it. The San Fran was very tricky last year, putting out some interesting information. You brought that up to me right before we started recording, and it's just so funny how everyone thought they were going to draft like Mac Jones for a while, and it's been switching back and forth.
Yeah, that was that's just kind of their MO, I guess, to keep people off the scent. And there is something to it. I guess they're not just trying to be piss ants and bug us. It's when you have a second, third, fourth, I guess it just depends how far you want to go down on this, but those real high leverage spots that aren't the number one pick, nobody can trade ahead of you for the number one pick. Mm-hmm. But when you're sitting in some of those spots and somebody might be able to trade ahead of you that's looking at something, you do have to keep other people on their toes. So I'm 100% sure there are teams that bring in players for interviews that have no intention of ever even thinking about drafting them. Like, we're going to bring this guy in, we're going to make a big deal out of it, a big enough deal where it's in the news. Like, hey, the Lions brought this guy in, and we're going to make sure everyone knows about it, just to keep people honest as far as not just knowing exactly where we're going and can trade ahead or, maneuver around you. So I don't blame them, but man, the Niners that was annoying last year. It was very, very difficult to figure out what was going on until the very end.
Oh, it sure was, man. I mean, you wish that you could have gotten in their heads early, because obviously Trey Lance was plus money for a long time. Nice plus money too. It was completely out of left field that they wanted him. And then at the very end, they kind of admitted what they did and talked about it. So that's really funny. I think you and I probably got on it super late when we got the information, which happens, but getting an information early is important. So what's been going on over at BetSperts, my man? You've been very active over there. I always follow that site, and I think you guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, my biggest project lately has been the golf product that we put out. I have multiple meetings every day over golf, working on that because it's something we wanted to get out right away with the Masters coming up, knowing that it's going to be a work in progress. So working on with the tech team on some new tools right now where people can do a lot of research. I think that's my favorite thing about the type of bettors that are getting into this that aren't just firing random parlays and 10 leg same game parlays, like the people who want to sit and do a little research and make some bets. So that's kind of what we're trying to cater to there, because we have just a grip of data from
Yeah.
the PGA, and we're trying to put it in a more manageable form for anybody to take their, I don't want to call them theories, but their thesis on that tournament and say, here's what I think matters this week. And I want to be able to figure out which golfers I think I should be betting in the quickest, easiest manner. So working on tools there. And then, the BetSperts app is getting some major facelifts with some more data coming in as far as being able to track all your prop bets, NBA, player prop bets, team prop bets, anything like that. Golf, all the golf betting, all the, once we get to NFL again. So just the offering of what bets you can track in the app just multiplied by about 1,000 once we get these final updates in. So that's very exciting. That stuff's just starting to trickle in right now with some beta testing with the NBA props, but that'll be very fun because maybe that's, I complain. I work here, but I complain about it too. But I wish I could track more stuff, and that's a
Yeah.
big part of what the dev team's been working on lately.
Yeah, most definitely. I love the prop markets, and they're huge. And
Oh yeah,
I got into them last year, and I was successful in the NFL props. I just concentrated one media outlet and TikTok for it, and the TikTok prop plays went really well. So I think tracking that's going to be very important coming up. And speaking about some of the modeling you do, I was just listening to the deep dive you and Drew over there, and you're talking about some Poisson distributions, and it got me all excited. First inning baseball stuff, and I was like, it's
yeah.
funny. I don't know how much modeling you do, and I have an NFL model, and I use it, but I've tried to model like other sports, and it's just very time consuming for me to get the data in there. I think there's some better ways of doing it and how people scrape, but I got to tell you, I was really excited hearing you guys talk about that, because that's kind of the next level stuff that we need to concentrate on. And just want to ask you, how much modeling do you do yourself?
With basketball, a lot, because I've found, and you're right, the time consuming part is often just getting the data in and getting it cleaned up. Like that's a pain. There's a lot of good sites that are easy-ish to scrape, I guess, for college basketball, which has been nice.
Mhm.
But that's what I'm saying with the golf product too. We're trying to make that like, hey, I'm sorry that I can't sit here and teach every single person how to build scrapers or pay someone to build scrapers. Like that part is tricky. That's a pain in the butt, even at the lowest level of just using import HTML on Google Sheets. I mean, there's some tricks and tips that you'll need, but the getting some people some data where they won't have to do that. But with college basketball, I'm pulling in a lot. NFL, little less so. More subjective stuff for me there, but I do have a team level model, especially for totals. And then golf is tricky because it is not like other sports at all. That is something we're dealing with over there too with the data team. Is it's not just team A versus team B. It's team A versus, or player A versus this golf course,
Right.
while 150 other guys are doing the same thing, and we'll see who ends up on top based on and then you have weather and things thrown in. So golf is a whole different basket, I suppose. But yeah, mostly college basketball. And like you said, we talked a little baseball. And I sat down when I had 10, 15 minutes and just started making a list of if I wanted to do a prop. And I went with like home run bets. Like two hit a home run, yes, tonight, because that's a fun one. Like if I'm gonna do one for recreationally, but build a little model, I'll do a fun one. And I,
Mhm.
I started making a list of all the things that could affect that, like the weather and, the park factors and some things. I started to look into, I mean, that's step one, is write down what info you need. And then step two, go find it and see if you can scrape it easily. and I'm just barely past step one on baseball. We're gonna let a few more games go by. I gotta figure out golf and the draft. I'm gonna let the draft pass by, and then I'll start working on baseball for sure.
Oh, I know. I can just imagine how deep you can go. Barrel rates and fly ball
Yes.
percentage on pitchers and wind. There's just so much stuff that you can put into it, and that's why I had a baseball model a long time ago, and it just got so convoluted. I just had to kind of scrap it. And there is a big modeling crew that sometimes shapes the baseball markets anyway, but sometimes just going back to what I do best and just kind of look for weakness in the market is probably what I stick with mostly in baseball. But great stuff, man. I love hearing about that. And if you get any farther on your little poison test there, I would like to hear more about it, Andy. So great stuff there, man. Well, let's talk about this draft class then. It's NFL time because it's always NFL time these days. And
Really is.
man, the quarterbacks in this draft, I gotta tell you, the market seems to not like them this year, and I'm trying to like them. I'm having a hard time. I want to know what your thoughts are on this quarterback class.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see stuff in the media. Oh man, a good example that I can't get out of my head because I posted to somebody else was, who's the guy, Lunardi, who does the bracketology. I think it was him. He
Mhm.
just big article, Duke's run ends with Murray State in round two, or like it's like I don't know if he actually believes that, but that's going to get a lot of clicks.
Yeah,
Like that's what you're dealing with in round one of March Madness. It's huge. It's it's a really big thing, and they're going to put some sensationalized article to get you to click on it, and you'll see that with everything. You see that with the draft, and I just don't think that's the case with these quarterbacks because every article is that way. Like nobody is trying to go contrarian and be like, well, actually, the Willis, and there are people that like Willis. There are people that like Howell. I mean, there's people that like those quarterbacks, but I think they like them compared to the general consensus. Like, yeah, he's not that bad, but at the same time, it is certainly nowhere near the classes we've had the past few years, or the classes we'll have coming up at least next year for sure. It's hard to grade out kids that are 2 years away from a draft, I think, but next year will be better, and last year definitely is better. And yeah, it's just a rough one for some of these teams, which is, I guess, good for the Jags. The Jags have a quarterback; they have a young quarterback drafting high. The Lions, I don't know, maybe they have enough needs where maybe they can wait and tank one more year. The Texans are kind of in a spot too. So a lot of these top teams, that's the worst case scenario is like we have no quarterback, we're a shit team, we lose all these games, we get a high draft pick, and then there's no quarterbacks there. Like that's the terrible scenario. And like
yeah.
I don't think like any of those teams are in that spot where they can't get another high draft pick if you're the Lions, the Texans, one of those teams. So, the goal would be to fire it back, run it back again, not tank. I hate telling a team to tank, but running it back and getting another high draft pick for next year, filling it in other spots. I mean, there's so many good linemen and defensive players, and all those teams have so many needs anyway. So
Mhm.
it stinks because it's fun to see these young quarterbacks get drafted and get excited about them all summer. But I don't know. We'll have to get excited about something else. It's not like I'm not going to watch the NFL.
Right. Well, great points. But it's funny. You wonder if it's worse for some of those teams that need a lot. Wouldn't it be better if the Jaguars could trade down to Atlanta's spot and just
Oh
get an
yeah,
extra second round? Nobody wants to do that with them now because nobody's going to go crazy for a quarterback. And I thought that they would. I put a small bet on each of the three quarterbacks that they'd be first pick, but then that was way back in February. And I realized afterwards it was a bad play because nobody likes the quarterbacks. But I think some of the reasons why is because the two best quarterbacks last year, at least QBR wise or stat wise, were Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I mean, those guys, the fact that they can't go out to the draft makes people like, well, we can't even get the best people out of this class this year. I think that hurts the perception of this class. And I also think that the fact that Trevor Lawrence didn't put the Jaguars in the playoffs, and you can there's
Yeah.
a million reasons why. Zach Wilson looked terrible on the Justin Fields looked lost on the Bears, and a lot of that's coaching issues, of course. And you and I know that the jury certain isn't out, but just their performances right there isn't going to make people like this class if this class can do a heck of a lot last year. So a lot going against them, Andy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and again, you never know. I'm horrible at watching a college career and telling you that that quarterback's going to be good in the pros. I'm about 2 for 50 on that. So maybe all these quarterbacks will be just fine. But I mean, from a talent standpoint, where the NFL teams are ranking these, it is a really bad quarterback class.
Hey, you are not the only one, because I said Mason Rudolph would be awesome and Lamar Jackson would suck. So there you go. I think I was pretty much in that boat as well. You know, it's funny now. What's going to happen? This will probably be the best quarterback class in the last 20 years. Now that we all hate this. It's funny. You look at Bailey Zappi; his numbers were like record breaking, and you compare him to Zach Wilson, and you're like, well, what's different? They're very similar quarterbacks. BYU had a terrible schedule last year, and he's drafted second. It's just so funny how things change. But no, that's a great discussion here. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. And everybody has next year's quarterback class already in the top of their draft board. So that definitely affects things here. And I think maybe you're going to see the Jaguars and a couple other teams, the Houston Texans with their better pick, sit there and wait till the clock gets down to 30 seconds. Maybe they're hoping for that offer that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's so tough. I mean, that was a great point by you. Like, if there was a surefire can't miss quarterback, and the Jags already have Trevor Lawrence, they probably have 3 or 4 suitors, and Atlanta, like you said, is one of them, and they're in a good position. So it does kind of stink for the Jags, I guess, but having the number 1 pick a couple years in a row doesn't hurt as far as building a base.
That's very true. Getting rid of Urban Meyer ain't too bad either. So
no, there you go.
We'll see how this year pans out with Doug. Well, cool, man. Let's get into a little position totals then. And I'm going to go by DraftKings. It's a common one that's used.
Sure.
It's decent limits, I would say, in some of the numbers here. But let's start with position totals here. And, it's funny about, some of the things that we say is quarterbacks are looked at as pretty low. I mean, 2.5 quarterbacks is the number, but it's juiced to the over at 2.5. Everybody says it's going to be 3 quarterbacks. What scares me about this one right now, Andy, is that the Lions, they pick 32nd and 34th. So I have absolutely no idea what they're doing, because 32nd is first round, 34th is the second pick of the second round. So that's where I'm stuck, and I don't have a play on that.
Oh, I looked at this. It's probably a market I'm avoiding. I know some people who found some 2.5s cheap early on in the cycle and bet that, but at a different book, and I think it was just over at FanDuel. Maybe I can't remember where I pulled this, but I found one place had 3.5 for quarterbacks, where it's obviously juiced the other way. And that's the toughest thing. It's not like LeBron rebounds, where they just have to bump it from 6.5 to 7.5 and change the number and be like, well, he could get another rebound if the market thinks so. Like, there's just not like that 4th quarterback that's sliding in. And I mean, for 4 to go would be very, very tough with all the needs and the kind of teams that would be looking for one later in that round. And it's under 3.5 is minus 210. Like you had at DraftKings, over 2.5 is minus 250. I want someone to just give me an exactly 3 at minus whatever the hell they want, and I'd probably lay some on that. But it's a market I did stay away from. And if I had to bet it, I might look at that. The under 3.5 is probably something I like a lot more than over 2.5. I think there's a lot of situations where it's just, Willis and Pickett, and that might be it. Like there's, like you said, with the Lions sitting right there at 34. I'm not, I'm hearing a lot of Ritter steam, and there's some teams that like Howell too. So I guess, but man, there's so many other good players, and there's only so many spots.
I also think that, and I agree with you, I would take 3.5. under, but the issue, and this happens to me every year with wide receivers. I always bet under and I get burned because these GMs fall in love with these
Yep.
players. It's usually quarterbacks and wide receivers too. It's like it makes no sense to draft them high in many cases. The year that I went under a big number and it went over, not one of those teams made the playoffs. Not one of them that took a first round receiver in 2020 made the playoffs. 7 or 8 of those teams, and it's just like people get scared and GMs get nervous. Maybe they secretly like Howell or Ritter and they're scared somebody else takes him, and then they quickly trade up into the first just to get them. And do they look as bad if they're trading into pick 33 or with the Jaguars or pick 30? They don't look as bad doing that. They would look bad if they're making a shot at a top 5, top 10, especially when the class is frowned upon. So that could happen, and that's what keeps me off this market as well. But I guess pivoting right into wide receivers, over 5.5 is also massively juiced at minus 240. And my experience is that people are infatuated with receivers, and I do not like this wide receiver class at all either, Andy. I'm very pessimistic in general, I guess, on this whole draft, but I also think it will go over 5.5 just because of what I said about the GMs as well. So what are your thoughts on that position?
Yeah, I mean, just like right off the top, 5, like almost certainly, like obviously Wilson, London, Jameson Williams, Olave, Burks, and then you get into that weird spot. And it has been bet up. This is another one where people have bet it up, and you end up with, I mean, it depends how you feel about the end of the round, where teams do like offensive playmakers. Teams love getting themselves a guy they can see selling tickets, selling jerseys, scoring points. It's a sexier pick, and it is an offensive league. But yeah, once you get past 5, it's tricky, and you see this every year where some sneak in, and I do believe it's going to be a more offensive heavy first round than maybe we've seen sometimes. But boy, it's at that price, there's just so much goofiness that comes up with this. And I talk about this when I tried to make a mock draft the last couple of years. And I said, it's fine and dandy to try to do the top 10, but after that, you're really, really, even the best in the world are just guessing, because all it takes is one person to do something weird, and think about a couple of years ago with the Raiders taking Ruggs. Like, that just wasn't where that was expected to happen and the wide receiver things got all messed up with Cooper going in a different spot. And it's like, what's happening when one weird GM decides to make a bad decision, and then 16 through 32 end up being way different than anybody can probably prognosticate. So it's another one that I'm certainly not betting the under, because there's just, there's 2 or 3 guys that are falling in that 25 to 35 range. They could absolutely Pickens. George Pickens goes first round. Sure. Watson, Dotson, one other one I'm trying to think of. There's just a few guys that are just right up there that if they go in the first round, that's not going to surprise me. So I respect the money that moved the over 3 or the over 5.5 for sure.
Me too. Treylon Burks and London from USC are 2 highly, higher projected ones. I think that might have been the ones you talk about. You're thinking about. I think the best wide receiver got injured, and that was Jameson Williams in the championship game. He tore his ACL. That means he's not playing till October, right? And that's what people are saying. It's like, do you want to take a receiver that can't play the first half of the year? And I guess if you're a really good team and you have some receiver depth and you can get to the middle, maybe that's okay, we'll wait till we'll wait, and we'll be okay waiting, because we'll be banged up by mid-October anyway, and we need them then. So it's tough to me, because I seen the Ohio State players when Olave and Wilson sat out in the Rose Bowl, and I'm like, Harrison's kid is better than both these guys, is what I was thinking. And the other guy, I forgot his name off.
It's the same time you see a Bama wide receiver get hurt.
Yeah.
like, oh, this is his backup, and then he goes for 8 catches for 225 and a touchdown. It's like, oh, that guy was benched. It's
Yeah.
just it's a wealth of riches at some of these programs. But yeah, like Wilson and Olave, London and Williams, like that's I just and Burks, like I those five I almost in pen. Burks is a little further down. There's people who have him out of the first round, but like I have five pretty much in pen, and then there's three guys that can sneak in. So when it's like you're banking on one guy, where is he going to go 28th to this team who likes him, or if he misses that, he's just not going. And I think people say that like if he doesn't go at 28, he's not going in the first round, and then they see the 30th and the 32nd picks end up with trades or something, and then they have to sit and sweat that out again. And I don't think a lot of that is worth it when you're laying north of $2 on some of these prices. That there's much surer bets out on the board if you want to lay minus 250 on something.
Yeah, for sure. There is. Going to here's an interesting one with the tight ends. It's funny because under 0.5, meaning under one, obviously, you got to be a zero here. Minus 700, right? Minus 700, you got to lay. Or if you really think someone can grab a tight end, plus 475. Now, obviously, you can probably shop that and get a better plus number than that. That's probably a little bit wrong. But I think that I look back to 2018, Andy, where Garrison Hurst, I believe it was, slipped into the first round, and I lost this bet. I took under, and I had a good number, and the number went in my favor, and then I lost it because a team fell in love with him, and nobody knew. He was like to pick 20. I think the Ravens picked him at 24th or 25th or something like that, if I remember properly. So, but the question is, being at plus 475, or let's just call it plus 500. 5-1. Is that worth a shot here because of what we don't know going on?
Yeah, I looked at this one a little because whenever you see that, just quickly in your head, you're like, oh, it just takes one. You just need one guy to find their way into the first. And really, like looking at the tight ends, it's just there's not a guy on the really in that edge spot. In that, maybe if you do some sort of composite, nobody falls in that 30 to 40 range where it's like somebody could bump him up. I feel like there's probably just too many good players in between, wherever somebody is drafting, maybe later in the first round, and where I think it's Trey McBride. I think he's Colorado, Trey McBride, and then the UCLA kid. Those are kind of your tight ends. Day two guys, it would be a big ask, but this is something to keep an eye on. If you hear anything, if somebody is talking like, hey, this is a guy we might have ranked a lot higher than other teams. If you catch any whispers, it's a big number.
Yeah.
Like all it has to be is some team that's, hey, we have this player a lot higher than maybe other teams, and it's somebody that would be looking at trading into the first. Although it doesn't feel like something you would have to trade in front of another team to get. So I still do think those are round 2, round 3 guys, and yeah, the tight end. It might be just another year with no tight ends. So I'm probably holding pattern on that one.
Yeah, it's funny. Last year, Kyle Pitts, super hyped. I mean, so hyped coming into this draft. And the thing that's I Florida, they played Alabama, but I mean, he had a pretty easy time in that SEC West minus the Georgia, or SEC East minus Georgia, and it's just kind of like he goes to Atlanta, and then the guy the guy from Penn State looked a little bit better that went to, and he's escaping my name, that went to the Steelers. Maybe you can think of him real quick. The tight end there ended up having a pretty good year. So you look at these guys that could have hurt them a little bit. I'm hearing a little buzz on Jelani Woods. He had a great 40 time, 4.61. He was the top bench press guy in the combine, I believe. But I think the fact that there's not a separation between some of the guys that you just mentioned, Connor Hayward, Okonkwo, they're okay with not getting like their guy. I think the people are looking at like they're all the same, so we'll wait, right?
Yeah, and Woods is another one. He's right there, not he's not far, not far from the other names I spit out there. There's kind of, I guess, I feel bad not mentioning him now, but he is right there too. So you got like three tight ends who are probably high end. Their ceiling is like high end second round guys.
Right,
If
right,
somebody
right.
falls in love with them, it's just going to be so hard for them to jump in front of some of these big names that are going to be near the end of the first round. So that's a tough ask. And the books, they put that price there for a reason. They're just tempting you. Like, I can see a
Exactly.
tight end. I get 5-1 on it. That's a nice little tickle. I bet they take a ton of small bets on that. Just people wanting to
You're right.
clean up on the tight end market.
Yeah, they'll be their liability. No, not small bets, but it's going to be one that
A
they're trying to make
shitload
some
of
money.
$10 bets, and just a whole bunch of $10 and $20 bets across a bunch of time, and suddenly they're sweating a tight end, which I don't think they have to worry.
No, I don't think so either. What? So in these positions with the totals, I did take one, and
Sure.
the reason I took this one and I laid minus 190 is because I don't see the separation similar with the tight ends, and I took under running backs. I did take under the 0.5 in running backs. I just don't see a team that needs to reach when they are so close to each other via rankings. I know Hall graded really well, and I'm trying to pull up my some of my rankings here. It's just taking me a minute. There's a couple like Walker, right, from Michigan State.
Yep.
He,
Walker, Zamir White, like there's
yeah,
I mean you're right. There's just like 2 or 3 guys there that are in that, I don't know, middle of the second round. And I think what you're trying to say is like no one has to reach, because if they don't get one, there's another one right there too. Like, oh, there's a few second round running backs. If we don't get our guy, we'll get a different guy, or we'll, maybe our need wasn't so strong, we could go to a different position. I mean, I would agree with that for sure. It's like there's 3 guys that are so similar and maybe skill and ceiling that people aren't going to reach for a running back, I wouldn't hope. Although teams do stupid stuff all the time.
yeah, they do. But
Yeah.
but thanks for telling me saying that. And I mean, Brian Robinson from Bama, slower 40 time. You got, like you said, there's 2 guys from Georgia that are both really good, and Brees Hall, and they're just all bunched up there. There's nobody worth reaching for in the first round. But instead of laying minus 700, I get minus 190. I just think it's way better value. It's the same situation, Andy.
Yeah, no, I like that one. I don't see there's just so much offensive line and defensive back talent, and there's a bunch of, again, it's probably 5, 6, maybe 7 wide receivers. You go 7 wide receivers, 3 quarterbacks, a couple safeties, 6 defensive linemen. All of a sudden, you're running out of room. Like, there's only so many spots. We always joke about that when we make these bets, and when you're sitting there at the end of the first round and you have like 4 more unders or 4 more will be drafted in the first round, and there's only 2 spots left. Like, this isn't gonna work. I'm done, run out of room. There's only so many picks. So yeah, I think for sure I like that price. Under minus 200 for. I've seen 1 or 2 mocks that have Brees Hall going, like, I want to say Buffalo was tied to. I think Buffalo's too smart for that. Kansas City, I've seen someone mock that, and I don't see that. They did a first round running back a couple years ago. They have bigger needs. Yeah, they have bigger needs than taking that sort of reach again. So no, I fully agree with you on that.
And Buffalo's the only one I thought of. So thanks for mentioning them. What I think with Buffalo is the way they got torched by Kansas City in that playoff game. They're going defensive back, man. They're going, a cornerback or safety. I just think that they're smart enough to know that, just like you said. So the Buffalo is my only concern there. But when you have Singletary and Zach Moss, I think they still retain those 2. Maybe they didn't. I thought they did. Then why would you reach here when you can get a guy later? So that was my thoughts, Andy. And you know what's funny about running back? Sincere McCormick. Remember that name that was everyone said from UTSA all year long? Sincere McCormick. Well, He ran the 40 at 4.6. And being 205 pounds, you should be running the 40 a little bit faster than them. So I almost think he hurt himself. And I'm looking on draft boards, and it's funny. Just this week, I totally forgot about it. I'm like, where the hell is Sincere McCormick right? He's not even the top 10 or top 15 of these boards. It's just so funny how touted a guy could be in college. Pretty much ran UTSA, a massive part of that team, winning Conference USA, and him not even being in a top 10 draft position. It's so funny to me, man.
Yeah, no, that sometimes these guys are awful smart as far as what they do for workouts. They know, like, I'm not running a 40. That's not going to help me.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I think that a wide receiver almost has to if he wants to be in the first round, because otherwise they're going to question. But you also have to know if you're slow enough where it's going to be worse than you just saying my ankle hurts, something like that. I think McCormick fell into that and he blew his draft position. He'll be like a late pick now if he's lucky. But let's go into a little bit of these position totals right now. And I'm just going to give you one that moved, and I got it at the plus 100. Some hype started coming in on Kayvon Thibodeau. What was funny about Kayvon, the defensive end, edge rusher, he was really the first guy that everyone was talking about before the college season last year. He played for Oregon. He was hurt a couple games, but he still has those measurables. And then the thing about Aiden Hutchinson, I love the kid and what he did at Michigan, and his stats were great. But to be honest with you, if you look at actual metric performances that, the pro day came and the combine a little bit, Thibodeau was faster. Thibodeau is more explosive. And I just thought he's, with the need an edge rusher and the hate for quarterbacks, it's going to be a big push for edge rusher. So I took him under 5.5 at plus 100, but it's already up to minus 180 now, getting close to where the value is going away, Andy. So any thoughts on that?
I have a heart, and this is a weird draft where a lot of things can happen at the top. And a lot of times we're sitting in this and we know who the top pick is, or we know who the top 2 is last year. When we're sitting there worried about 3, everything was figured out till then. But like the Neal, Hutchinson, Walker, Thibodeau, Ekwonu, like all that stuff Malik Willis sliding in there in a weird spot, like all that stuff could get messed around. I still think just like getting past the Jets and the Giants is tough. That's tough. Like if you're both of those teams, and we'll see if the Giants realize how far behind some people are so far behind the race they think they're actually ahead. Giants sometimes fall into that, but
yeah,
they know they have so many needs, both defense and offensive line. Like I could see them skipping and going, like a cross, or if Ekwonu fell. I don't know if Neal could possibly fall that far, but there's a lot of things that can happen. I just don't see Thibodeau getting past both of those teams. And I've seen mocks that have him out at 7. Like, I guess what, he fell. Carolina ends up skipping on him too, and he goes to the Giants. The Giants would love that if they could get Thibodeau at 7. That'd be great for them. But man, that's not something I see happening. I think I like that one.
All right, cool. Yeah, and some of those teams, Texans, Detroit, the Jets, Giants, all bottom 6 in pressure rate last year. So it just screams.
Yeah, they all need help.
Yeah, it does. And especially when they're so deep at the other positions, it's time to get the best of those positions over with before you miss on it. And that's kind of the way I looked at it. So I know you made a lot of your plays late last year in the draft. Yeah. Did you make any of these position prop plays yet?
There was some smoke around Walker going first, so I played some Hutch to go over 1.5. Like just the position as far as where his positional would be, because it was a bigger number. And I really wanted to go back to your Thibodeau thing. Like if something happens where it goes Walker, Hutchinson first, second, that's all of a sudden you have two edge guys are gone. I think at that point your Thibodeau thing is like, there's no way the Giants or Jets can wait at that point. Like You're sitting. I mean, who's your fourth best? The Florida State kid. So I think
Yeah.
for sure they if those two are gone by the time they get to 4, one of the New York teams is for sure grabbing him. So I do have a little on that. And then I mean for the most part, it's been just little nibbles here and there of overs and unders on some players. I'm playing around a little in the core of the wide receiver markets. That's something again, like you said, shop around. There's stuff that's almost overlapping to the point of arbitrage with some of these positional spots, like the Olave. There's a book that has him under -110 and another that has him over +110. It's
Mhm.
it's
Right, right,
it's
right.
it's really close to being able to play just both sides on these without even waiting, at
Yeah.
playing the bets at the same time. So um I think the wide receiver markets, if you look around, you can find some decent prices on first wide receiver taken. There's a few, I don't know, yeah, Wilson is chalk. I think it's probably going to be chalk everywhere. Most mocks have him
Yeah.
pretty high, but there's a there's a decent chance that is something that drops. So like a Drake London at a decent price is something I've popped a little here and there, and I don't mind that if you can find that at better than 2 to 1. But like you said, the wide receiver markets get wild, so I'm taking it kind of easy on that. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about which wide receiver goes off the board first. It's just been kind of solid consensus that it's just Garrett Wilson no matter what.
I try to talk myself out of it, and I kept falling back on Garrett Wilson. And it's because of, like I said, with Jameson Williams' injury. Drake London didn't play a full year last year. He didn't run the combine either. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like two things for him. Chris Olave's vertical jump was 4 inches lower than Garrett Wilson's, and Garrett Wilson had a tiny 100th or whatever of a second faster on his 40. People are saying Garrett Wilson's the more explosive one. I think that there's some more value later in this wide receiver draft, looking at guys like David Bell, looking at guys, Jahan Dotson. I really like him a lot. You got Mechie sitting out there, Justin Ross. I mean, what happened to him? I mean, he was a massively touted guy, right? Justin Ross. It's like, I like these guys more. I really do. So that's why I think as myself, I would go under 5.5. But as these GMs think, I think it goes over,
Yeah.
So drives me freaking nuts, man.
And that's where the Olave thing, I don't understand why Olave's numbers is even for it. Like, there's just, if somebody took him as the first wide receiver, yeah, I don't know. I would have to take that guy's GM card away, I guess. That's just if somebody really talked themselves into Williams, that would be surprising. But Olave or Burks would be just wild. So for me, it's Wilson or London. And if you can find a good London number, I think there's a shot that maybe what was it? The Commodores? What are we calling them now?
The
Commanders. The Commanders. I couldn't think of the damn team name. Yeah, it's the Commanders.
I call them the Guardians recently, so there you go.
Oh, the Guardians. There you go. But yeah, the Commanders. There's a few spots there where a wide receiver could go depending on how things happen. 10-11 is kind of that area there where I think we get to settle that one.
Yeah, what's funny is you look at the Jets and they're so projected to pick a wide receiver, and I'm like, well, they just last 2 drafts they picked one in the second round, and they just signed freaking what's his face over from Tennessee last year that turned out pretty good, and it's just it blows my mind that they're sitting here drafting another wide receiver with their second pick. It's just the same repeat every single year. What doesn't work for you, and I just like the second round receivers a lot more, as I said before, and Wan'Dale Robinson's there too. And
yeah,
I just look at these names and I like them a lot better. But before we go, I want to ask you a question, and I have an answer to it, but I'm going to ask you first.
Oh, there we go.
What is the Matt Rule, right? I thought that they would be better last year. Sam Darnold was an awful choice. Now you're sitting here with the team in Carolina Panthers that have the 6th pick of the draft, and they don't pick until the 4th round now. And you got Matt Rule biting his nails wondering what the hell is going to save his job, Andy. Well, I'm going to ask you, what can the Carolina Panthers do to save Matt Rule's job? Not the smart thing to do, like trade down or anything. I mean, what is going to save this man, or has the highest chance of saving his job for next year?
So that's the thing. Like the right move, like if you're building a team, is to probably take whatever falls to you there. If it's, again, I don't know about taking a safety that high, although they need help all over. But like if Cross is there, if there's, if you can get a really good lineman, if you can get a really good defender, like that's the move. That's what the team should do. But you don't save your job by, drafting a really good offensive lineman and stuffing like, oh, look how good this young offensive lineman is on our 3-14 team. Like you would lose your job at that point, even though you did the right thing long term for the franchise. So it does kind of feel like they might do something stupid and end up with a quarterback. If they take a quarterback at 6, they should probably just pack it in and call it a year anyway. But like trading back for a quarterback, I think, is the how do I save my job move. Like find a way to trade out of that spot, move down for Pickett, move down for Howell, Ritter, whoever. Like it doesn't matter. If you're just trying to get one more year, just find a spot, trade down, and take whatever quarterback's there, and try to pretend that was your plan all along. Like if you're just playing game theory, trying to get one more year of paychecks, is that? But like if they go like Pickett at 6, Jesus, I don't know. I don't know what I can do. That whole team, like everyone would have to go to the top. All of it, cut off the head.
I think if you could trade down and still be in the first round to draft the third quarterback or something, would
Perfect.
make you
Yeah.
that would make you look good. Like let's say maybe the Steelers do like somebody a lot more, right? And maybe they do give you their second round pick or something because you don't have that. So you get a quarterback that's touted, could be a Desmond Ritter, could be like you said, Pickett maybe. I don't think if you like Howell, that's great. I think that's the number one thing that you could do, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think anyone's going to give them anything for that pick because I don't think a lot of people, unless there's maybe Kayvon Thibodeau is there or something. I don't know. But I think they unfortunately, I mean, the best thing to do is get San Fran's quarterback, but that's not going to happen. A lot of people are.
I was going to say they need to trade then if they can't do that. I looked at this and it's hard to judge because they have a new GM and we don't know much about Mr. Kwesi, but the Vikings sitting in their spot where they're at it. I mean, it's not far enough down maybe to make it. I mean, if you take Pickett at 12, I guess you take Pickett at 12, but trading with Minnesota, who has like a bottom 5, maybe a little better. If there's an offensive lineman there, like if Cross is on the board and you can talk to Minnesota about moving up for a swap there, they can get their offensive lineman, or maybe there's a cornerback the Vikings really want. Maybe that's a trade partner, but it's a tough ask because you're not going to get what you want. But maybe the optics are a little better if you take a quarterback at 12 and 6, I guess.
That's true. I mean, let's say that can't happen. I think San Fran would be stupid not to keep 2 quarterbacks here because Jimmy Garoppolo was top 5 EPA per play. He was fantastic last year with what he had to work with. And Trey Lance is not proven and he could still be a bust. Imagine them being stupid and like getting Darnold or something just because they don't want the controversy because of the media. That would be one of the worst. That would be the best case scenario for Matt Rule. But to be honest with you, if he has to stay in this position, drafting a Kenny Pickett or a Charles Strong, they'll get killed. They will absolutely get killed. That offensive line is freaking terrible. So unfortunately, I think the only thing that could possibly save him if they can't trade out of that is Malik Willis. And it sucks because he played for Liberty and he looked bad on his senior day. And but he has 4.42 speed. So I look at it like this. I was down on Lamar Jackson too, and he turned out well, right? Kyler Murray, I mean, he was everyone's number one, but he went to a school with a bad NFL team in the Cardinals with a very bad offensive line, and he was adequate. He's pretty good there. So maybe if Matt Rule can kind of have a system like he check down once or twice and freaking run for the stars, slide, get 5 yards, get 7 yards, get chunks. Maybe with that pretty good defense that Carolina has, that could work out for them, and maybe that could save his job. And I know I'm reaching here, and I don't think.
But I mean, you're right. You need headlines to save your job. Like they have to be writing nice things about you in the paper. Otherwise, I mean, in the position he's at, he's hot seating it. When you're hot seating it, you need some nice headlines, and you're not going to get nice headlines out of a good offensive lineman or a good cornerback. And cornerbacks take a year. Like it's just such a tough defensive players in general. It's so hard for a defensive player. You don't see things like we saw in Dallas. Rookies don't come into the league that often and play well on defense. It's very, very difficult because it's a reactionary position where you have to be following a wide receiver or trailing a tight end. Like you have to react to somebody who's been in the league for 10 years. The only exception really is like just a pure edge rusher. Like your job is to go kill the quarterback. Just try to get around these guys. Like for the most part, it's hard to get a defensive player in the draft and really wow the local media with what you did in the draft at that point. It's one guy per year, it feels like. And that's, that, like you said, to save your job, I'm not rolling the dice on a defender.
Yeah, you're not rolling the dice on a defender, and an offensive lineman's not going to do it because Sam Darnold's not going to get you the playoffs. It's just like a massive wild card, boom or bust potential, and that's the only one I could really think of, Andy. Well, my man, we went a long time. Really appreciate your insight. I had a great conversation with you. Love it. I can't wait to hear more from you guys on the deep dive and brown bag bets and all that, those great places and great podcasts that you put out every single week. But where could our users and listeners and viewers find your great information and follow you?
Yeah, at Andy MSFW on Twitter, Deep Dive Pod on Twitter, Brown Bag Bets on Twitter. Deep Dive, we're doing a special draft guest on Wednesday night, 7 Central. That'll be a fun one. One final draft show, and then I think something we don't get into enough, next Monday we're going to do a little Dynasty Football League talk. Because who better to break down the rookie class after they get drafted than the guys who care more about it than, honestly, anybody I ever thought could. The Dynasty League guys are so big into that, and we acquired DLF, Dynasty League Football, so have a bunch of those guys who are really smart with following these rookie classes into the NFL and deciding what kind of value they pose from a fantasy standpoint, but obviously mostly on the offensive side. So some pretty fun NFL episodes coming up. We do a lot of this and that in the off season, but I love it when we get back to just straight up NFL stuff.
Yeah, me too, man. And I will be tuning in, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. I'll be texting you and tweeting at you over the weekend.
All right, perfect. Thanks. Good luck with all your bets.